So, hello everyone, guys. This is Kartik, and we have Shivay again with us, and he will be talking about TensorFlow today. So, this is another session about org awareness, and we'll be talking about TensorFlow, how you can contribute to it, right? How you can start your contribution journey. It also participates in Google Summer of Code and many other open source organizations. So, we will be able to know about that, what technology stack or tech stack it uses, right? And where you can contact the potential people and all that. So over to you, Shivai. So please introduce yourself.
All right. Thank you so much, Karthik, for again having me over for this podcast. I'm Shivay. I graduated last year from my undergrad degree in computer science, and I've been a Google Summer of Code mentor for various organizations such as Jenkins, MediaPipe, and TensorFlow. And I've been particularly working towards the domain of integration of machine learning with web, specifically with TensorFlow JS. And I'm a community lead for India for TensorFlow JS, and also an active part of the SIG and the working group over there. So TensorFlow got started as an open source library by Google, which enables you to sort of use very high end and highly computational scenarios within machine learning. So the core of TensorFlow is sort of utilizing tensors, which are high dimensional vectors that contain numerical data, and then a lot of these tensors, they go through numerical transformations with various mathematical functions, and these are used quite often with various different domains of AI, such as computer vision, NLP, right, natural language processing. So it's really sort of meant for such kind of highly intensive machine learning tasks. And I mean, that's really about TensorFlow. But today, of course, TensorFlow, outside of the the library itself, now it's like complete framework where we have a lot of different support for other kind of languages, various tools that have been built on top of TensorFlow. So we'll be discussing about all of that, and how can you get how can you sort of contribute to TensorFlow, and if you're specifically looking out for open source contributions in programs such as Google Summer of Code. So what are some of the different things that you can do? So again, since TensorFlow is completely open sourced, so there is like a dedicated GitHub for it. So we can directly just go to github.com, and we can go to TensorFlow. So GitHub, this is it. All right. Right. So we can just probably go to TensorFlow. So again, by far TensorFlow is one of the most popular projects, and I mean it's quite evident by this the number of stars that are there, more than 161,000 stars that you can see on GitHub. So of course it's a really popular project. A lot of machine learning enthusiasts, and also like people, businesses, they use TensorFlow in their production environment. So it's a really huge ecosystem that is there for TensorFlow. So I mean, of course, when someone who might go and just look at the TensorFlow repository, seeing 100,000 plus commits and like 2,000 plus issues and pull requests. So yes, there is a steep learning curve associated with TensorFlow, and there's no denying of that fact. The core logic of the TensorFlow has been written in C++. So some of the most popular programming languages that you will find across TensorFlow would include things such as C++, Python, and since TensorFlow is also supported for a lot of different other languages, so we have like dedicated TensorFlow JS that is meant for TensorFlow for web. Then we have TensorFlow Lite that is used to be able to run lightweight machine learning models on lower powered devices such as Android, Swift. So like there is a dedicated library for Swift as well. Then we have for Rust, like TensorFlow Rust. So a lot of those particular code bases you'll find in those specific languages, but mostly TensorFlow itself is built on C++, and then of course things such as Python. So some of the most important tools that are there include TFJS, that is TensorFlow JS. Then of course the official TensorFlow, TF Lite. Then we have TFX, that is sort of a platform which allows you to deploy machine learning pipelines, right, end-to-end pipelines of creating workflows that involve machine learning, from the training to the testing, and then whatever responses that you get from the machine learning algorithms, what are predictions that you get, being able to use them in production workflows. And then of course we have a dedicated repository just for datasets. So these datasets are really important if you want to build a project that involves TensorFlow. It could be used for research, it could be used for a production case. And of course, we have a lot of other different kind of things such as TensorFlow. I would say TensorFlow Rust is quite gaining a lot of popularity today. Then there is dedicated quantum, TensorFlow Quantum, that is used for quantum computing and how you can use neural networks, TensorFlow within quantum computing. Then we have Magenta, which is dedicatedly for music generation with TensorFlow. So these are some of the projects that are quite, sort of important. And also there's something called as tensor board, which allows you to sort of visualize different kinds of TensorFlow models and how do they actually interact behind the scenes. So of course all of these different projects are there, but of course TensorFlow definitely has, I would say, a sort of a steep learning curve, especially if you're willing to contribute to some of the projects that are including like the main TensorFlow. Because even like let's say if you're contributing to TensorFlow JS, a lot of the things that go on the backend will involve you to have knowledge about things such as WebAssembly, WebGL, and even these will require you to have a decent knowledge of C++. And we're not like just talking about the C++ that you might have in college, right? The normal C++, CPP things that we do. It definitely requires a bit more in-depth knowledge about, system level programming that we can say. So those are some of the projects that are out there. Now, of course, the entire ecosystem is open source, and Google Source Code is one of the projects. It's one of the open source programs that TensorFlow takes part in. There are some of the other ones, including Outreach program, right? Google Scissor of Docs. So those are some of the programs in which you can contribute to, open source projects. And of course, given that there are some kind of complexity involved with it, there are a lot of great resources because of the fact that it is such a large ecosystem. You'll find a lot of dedicated resources, a lot of blogs, a lot of video tutorials, like on platforms such as Coursera or Udemy. Like there are a lot of dedicated resources that you can use, and like a lot of good books as well to get started with TensorFlow, to get started with machine learning. So you'll find a few of those resources over here if you want to take part, if you want to learn about machine learning. Then of course there are like dedicated learning resources for for TFJS, for the core TensorFlow. And if you go and look at any of these, like you'll find great tutorials and also like video based concepts where you can learn.
C++ is mandatory, right? Before using these resources also, right? So C++
so not exactly.
Yeah.
So not exactly, but if you are willing to really understand that how TensorFlow works from behind the scenes, like the inner workings of TensorFlow, right? Okay. So of course, I mean, you could just like, for example, what happens in machine learning, that you either build a model yourself, and usually you will build a model in Python. Then you might, either use a pre-built model and directly use that as an application. So if you're working towards those sites, right, then it's fine. I mean, even if you don't know about C++, it's completely fine. You'll be able to contribute. But what I'm saying is that if you want to understand how TensorFlow works from within, right, internally, that is where C++ would be required. And that goes on for a lot of these projects as well. Because, for example, let's say if you're contributing to TF Flight and you want to work on, and usually, I mean, with TensorFlow and a lot of these projects, including TF Flight, TensorFlow JS, there are a lot of different kernels and ops that are used that help to do a lot of different kind of things, such as, for example, there will be specific kernels that will be involved for a particular type of model. For example, if you're using WebAssembly, there are special, kernels that are, running on the system level, and these are written with C, right, with C++. So in case you're going ahead and wanting to contribute towards that part, then you'll require C++ knowledge. But of course, sometimes, I mean, you could be working on projects that are just creating examples, working on data sets, working on some, like Python-based models, working on things such as TF Quantum, right? Magenta. So if you're working towards the application side of things, similar to how we were doing with Jenkins, in that case you're not required. But what the key factor is that in case you gain an interest to be able to contribute to some of the internal workings of these projects, you will be required to know the knowledge of C++.
So the core part basically, right? So first
Yes.
know the core part. So basic advice should be like, if you want to contribute heavily, so you should know the core part, and for that you should know the C++, right? Okay.
Yeah, because for example, for me myself, I used to earlier work on just the application side of TFJS, that is TensorFlow.js, because I myself was not very familiar with the C++ part, or how TensorFlow internally used to work, right? And I used to, even when I was utilizing things such as writing machine learning models in Python, I was doing with libraries such as Keras, right? I was using them to build my models. But of course, now if you want to really go into the mathematical side, because all of those mathematical calculations, like the linear algebra, all of that is involved with you could say the manipulation of the tensors. That is where the C++ bindings sort of lie. Like that is the core part where, and if you want to really go into that, then you will be required to learn about C++. So whenever, like if you look at some of these projects, there's a healthy balance being maintained whenever even TensorFlow as an organization, they take part in Google Summer of Code or such kind of open source programs. There's a healthy balance that they maintain between being able to contribute to from the application side and from the core side. So, but the core side definitely has a good learning curve that is involved. So just having superficial knowledge will not be enough for you to contribute. So that's one thing to keep in mind.
So can we learn more about the community, where to contact, any dedicated channels for that?
Yes, absolutely. So the best channel today to contact anyone is basically our TensorFlow forum, which is on Discourse. So you can join over there. Now, of course, there are a lot of different meetup groups. So these are called as TensorFlow user groups. These are dedicated user groups or local chapters in various cities around the world. You can join them and be part of common groups. So for example, specifically if you have dedicated technical questions, some questions about the projects, the TensorFlow forum or the Discourse forum is probably the best site to do it. We earlier were quite active on the mailing list, but we have moved away from the mailing list and we have started with the forum. And of course, since everything goes on GitHub, you can contribute to GitHub. And then of course, if you want to contribute, then there are certain things including how to contribute to code, what are some of the guidelines that you should be aware of. So all of that has been well documented in this community section, right? And of course, again, even if you don't want to contribute to the code, you can always contribute by being part of these user groups, by contributing to the translations, documentation. All of that is also possible with the help of being able to contribute. So even if you're not interested to make this contribute, these are all the different ways in which you can contribute, right? Answering questions on Stack Overflow, answering questions on Discourse platform, reporting some issues, reviewing the pull request. So, but there are, of course, dedicated guidelines when you want to contribute to code. What are things that you should keep in mind? All of those are given over here. And of course, in terms of resources that you can have a look at, things to keep in mind is that it's not necessary to have knowledge about machine learning if you want to contribute to TensorFlow. So a lot of times there is a misconception that you need to be a PhD in machine learning to be able to contribute to TensorFlow. It is not absolutely true. Of course, if you just know some of the basic fundamentals of machine learning, it will help you to understand from a business logic why tensors work the way they work, right? So it is not necessary to know machine learning to be able to contribute to TensorFlow, but it's a good thing to have. If you know about machine learning, you'll be able to understand some of the things from a mathematical angle as well. Now, coming to programs such as the Google Summer of Code, TensorFlow is one of those organizations that is quite strict. So you'll find that a lot of people who who gets selected for TensorFlow while they're contributing to open source, TensorFlow has a huge rate of drop off. Like between, like if you don't, like if you lag behind in Google Source Code, like if you're a participant, if you're contributing to Google Source Code, and you don't, sort of match up to the requirements, then you will be dropped. So it is quite strict in terms of the overall process, and because of the fact that there is no like dedicated community of developers, right? As compared to, let's say, Jenkins, the more code contributions that you make, the more well-known your contributions are. You will be judged on basis of that. Of course, if you have an online presence outside of just being able to contribute to the code base and being able to make open source contributions, that is an added bonus. But a lot of the sort of the things really go into how you have contributed, and that's not just limited to like being able to solve some issues, but also your personal projects, how you have used TensorFlow. And it could depend on the project to project, for example TFJS or TensorFlow Lite, but they definitely look out for highly technically advanced people. Like you definitely require a good technical knowledge, and so I would say that the ratio of your community work and like being active in the community and the code is slightly variant, as compared to let's something like Jenkins. Because these projects, I mean, you can definitely just think about that these projects are huge, right? Like all of these projects are quite huge, so you do need certain technical expertise in order to contribute to them. So again, my suggestion to all of you would be start early, like learn the fundamentals of these concepts, because these organizations are so huge, right? You might feel a little disdained, but one thing to keep in mind is that even the I mean the contributors who are contributing to TensorFlow, or like the maintainers, you can expect certain delay in response at times, because just that these people who are project maintainers, they are part of Google team, they are working their full-time jobs, and then they are also like maintaining these projects. So there can be at times a delay in response, but usually people outside of the main contributors, because it's such a huge ecosystem, that some of the other one will help you get started. So start contributing early to, if you're interested in TensorFlow. It can get a bit competitive, right? Because of course of the fact that it's such a huge project, and of course the learning path for you would be that really understand and look at the contributing guidelines quite well, otherwise your pull request or contributions will be rejected. So make sure that you go through the contributing guidelines well in advance and learn the concepts about TensorFlow, right? And again, of course, given the fact that yes, there's no denying of the fact that it is a huge project, but you don't have to really mug up the entire project at once. Start looking at some of these open source issues that are marked as beginner friendly issues, and you'll find certain issues that will be easy to resolve, and that way you can start your journey. But of course, contributing to TensorFlow will take time, so you have to be patient in your approach when contributing to TensorFlow. So don't get demotivated, even if it takes you like 2 to 3 months to just get more and more familiarized with the project.
So basically this organization actually works on talk is cheap, show me the code, right? So basically yes. And this is actually strict because it's a Google maintained projects, and
yes.
If you will actually interview for Google jobs as well, so they actually see the style of the code you're writing, so that is actually important here. So yes, open source actually teaches you the best practices, so you have to follow that, but yes, there is a steep learning curve. Shiva, any advices that how you started so that the viewers can also get an idea, so that they can also...
Absolutely. Sure. So for me personally, as I mentioned, right, that the way I started was a bit unconventional. To like, I was not particularly contributing to the TensorFlow org itself. I was more involved with the advocacy side of things, right? Talking more about how to use TensorFlow.js, building projects around it, mentoring other people on how to use TensorFlow.js. And I was less on the actual core contributing. That's something that I started out this year itself. and that is when I started to learn about technologies such as WebAssembly, and then how these work. So the more you interact with people in the ecosystem, you will be able to gain knowledge about those concepts, and these people also definitely then help me out in understanding some of the functions and how like the inner underlying architecture of each of these projects works, specifically like let's say TensorFlow.js. And then I started contributing with a few different ops and kernels that that operate, and that is how you're also supposed to be doing, right? So yeah, I mean that's how I started out, and I still focus a lot more towards the advocacy side rather than the infrastructure side. So I still I'm more towards the outreach side of how to make more and more developers get to know about TensorFlow.js, and then of course from a code side I look more towards the application, like how we can build more and more applications that utilize TensorFlow.js as a library. But of course, if you want to learn more about the core functionality, how it works, I'll recommend some good courses such as there are dedicated TensorFlow courses by deeplearning.ai on Coursera. You can go through that. That's a really good. And then there's a dedicated TensorFlow book. I forgot the name, but I think it's an O'Reilly book. This one. So it's hands-on Skykit learning by Aurélien Giron. This is a really good book if you want to like have something related to like a book-based one. So this is also a really great book to sort of understand about TensorFlow.
So there are actually various ways to getting involved. So if you're aiming for open source, and that should be the first aim before Google Summer of Code or any other open source program. So you can start with the advocacy as Shivay started, and then he has also told you certain resources. And for the coding part, he's saying that it is well and good if you start with the application side rather than going in the core side. And then yes, you can gradually learn the concepts and you can shift to the core side, right, Shivay? This is the concise summary, right? Okay, cool.
Absolutely.
So, Shivay, like any of the previous Google Summer of Code projects, which the viewers can see?
Yeah, sure. So for that, we can just probably go to the Google Summer of Code archive. So let me just go to archive. And I mean, yeah, of course, we can just look out for, again, like TensorFlow has also been one of the most prevalent organizations that has been there for at least the past 5-6 years. Yep. So, and again, it gets a lot of different projects, so again, if you look just specifically for the 2020 projects, you'll find that, okay, there are some things related to Hadoop support. So this is more towards, the actual implementation, like the core side, but then you will find things such as TensorFlow new models and demo. So this will be more towards Python and being able to create demos. So this is again towards the application side. Then state of the art 2.0 models. Again, this will be based on the application side, right? Then again, datasets library. Then incorporating point-based convolutions. Now this will be again based towards C++, right? So you'll find that there are a good variety of projects that include both from a core or from this the application sides. So this will like each and every year we have like such kind of projects. Now we have also started having projects related to JAX. Now JAX is like a dedicated new upcoming library that is dedicated for scientific computing that involves TensorFlow. So that is also a new upcoming field that you can also contribute to, and it will be part of Google Summer of Code. So yeah, I mean, that's what this goes on to show, that some of these projects will be brand new projects that are more related to improving the library itself. Some of them will be related to building applications, and some of them will be related to improving the existing libraries and the existing code base.
Okay, sure. So guys, that was it about TensorFlow. So this is pretty much sums up everything, and you can see that there are balanced side approach with TensorFlow actually follows, that is application and the core projects. So both are there, so you can see according to your technical expertise like on which part you want to contribute, right? So Shivay, I want to thank you a lot for coming here and actually advocating about this organization to the viewers and giving such a deep view. So guys, that's it for TensorFlow org awareness. So I hope that you're able to get all the things very, very well, and We'll be putting all the links in the description. So until then, guys, we'll be meeting in the next session. Thank you very much.